You live before the face of God, whether you acknowledge it or not. Every thought that passes through your mind does not drift through a neutral universe. It rises like incense or stench before a holy throne. We speak much about changing our habits, our circumstances, our relationships, but we give little attention to the battlefield where all of these are first decided. Long before a man ruins his life, he has excused a pattern of thinking. Long before a woman walks away from truth, she has entertained lies in the quiet places of her mind. Your life is not shaped first by what you do with your hands, but by what you allow to remain unchallenged in your thoughts. Do not deceive yourself into believing that your thoughts are harmless because they are hidden. The unseen world is the most decisive world there is. God weighs hearts, not appearances. He does not merely judge actions, he searches motives. He does not only listen to words, he examines the inner dialogue that gave them birth. If you are careless with your thoughts, you are careless with your soul. And if you are careless with your soul, it does not matter how impressive your outward life may appear to others. You say you want transformation, but you resist discipline of the mind. You pray for change, but you refuse to confront the way you think. You want God to fix what you have broken, but you do not want him to challenge the lies you have loved. Understand this clearly. God will not transform a life that refuses truth. He will not sanctify what you insist on protecting from his light. The mind is not a playground. It is a battlefield. Every thought is either aligning you with truth or training you in deception. You cannot live a holy life while feeding on unholy thoughts. You cannot walk in humility while rehearsing pride in your mind. You cannot claim faith while constantly meditating on fear and self-pity. What you dwell on shapes what you desire, and what you desire directs what you pursue. This is not psychology dressed up as spirituality. This is the testimony of Scripture and the experience of every honest believer who has walked the narrow road. Many people want a Christianity that leaves their thinking untouched. They want comfort without conviction, assurance without repentance, promises without obedience. But the call of God is far more invasive than that. He does not merely invite you to modify your behavior. He commands you to renew your mind, and renewal is not passive. It does not happen because you feel inspired one morning or stirred by a message. Renewal is war. It is the daily, sometimes hourly, confrontation of lies with truth. It is the refusal to let your mind drift where your flesh wants to go. Your thoughts are being trained whether you realize it or not. Every image you consume, every word you linger over, every fantasy you indulge is shaping you. You are not standing still. You are being formed. The only question is by what? If you do not deliberately submit your mind to truth, it will be discipled by the world, the flesh, and forces that care nothing for your soul. Neutrality is a myth. Passivity is surrender. Do not say that you cannot control your thoughts. That is not humility, it is unbelief. You may not control the first knock at the door, but you decide who you invite inside. You may not prevent temptation from presenting itself, but you are responsible for whether you entertain it. God has not commanded the impossible. He has given His Spirit, His Word, and His promises. The problem is not inability, it is unwillingness. We are often far more committed to our comfort than to our sanctification. You train your body for lesser things. You discipline yourself to learn skills that will perish with this world. And yet you treat the mind, the very command center of your life, with casual neglect. You allow it to wander unchecked, to feast on garbage, to replay grievances, to rehearse lusts, to magnify fears. Then you wonder why you are weak, anxious, defeated, and inconsistent. A neglected mind will always produce a compromised life. Consider how often your thoughts revolve around yourself, your reputation, your comfort, your wounds, your ambitions, your disappointments. You call it reflection, but much of it is self-absorption, and self-absorption is not harmless, it is corrosive. It shrinks your world until God Himself is pushed to the margins. Transformation does not begin when you think better about yourself. It begins when you think less about yourself and more rightly about God. When your thoughts are saturated with truth about who God is, much of what enslaves you loses its power. Fear diminishes when you meditate on His sovereignty. Lust weakens when you dwell on His holiness. Pride crumbles when you consider His greatness. Despair lifts when you remember His faithfulness. But this does not happen by accident. You must deliberately set your mind on things above, not in vague sentiment, but in disciplined practice. You must learn to interrogate your thoughts. When a thought arises, do not immediately accept it as truth simply because it feels real. Ask where it came from. Ask whether it aligns with what God has revealed. Ask what kind of fruit it produces. Many believers are tormented not because they lack faith, but because they lack discernment. They believe every accusation, every fear, every lie whispered in the dark. They do not test the spirits, they submit to them. You say you are overwhelmed, but what are you meditating on? You say you are anxious, but what narratives are you rehearsing? You say you lack joy, but where does your mind go when it is unguarded? A mind trained to expect the worst will interpret everything through despair. A mind trained in truth will stand firm even when circumstances are dark. Your circumstances may not change immediately, but your stability will. Training your thoughts requires intentional exposure to truth. Not quick glances, not inspirational fragments, but sustained engagement. Truth must be known, understood, and remembered. You cannot fight lies with vague impressions. You need a well-stocked armory, and that armory is built over time through disciplined intake and careful reflection. Shallow minds are easily shaken. Deep minds are not easily deceived, but understand this: knowledge alone is not enough. You can fill your head with correct ideas and still be untransformed if you refuse obedience. Truth is meant to be applied, not merely admired. When truth confronts you, it demands a response. To delay obedience is to dull your conscience. To repeatedly ignore conviction is to train your heart to resist God. And a resistant heart will eventually produce a distorted mind. Some of you are exhausted because your thoughts are at war with God. You know what is right, but you constantly negotiate with wrong. You justify what God condemns. You excuse what He calls you to kill. That internal conflict drains your strength. Peace is not found in compromise. It is found in surrender. When your thoughts come into alignment with truth, there is rest, not because life is easy, but because you are no longer fighting God. Do not underestimate the power of small compromises in the mind. No one wakes up one morning and decides to ruin their life. It begins with tolerated thoughts, entertained fantasies, unchecked resentments. What you allow today, you will justify tomorrow. What you justify tomorrow, you will practice the next day. And what you practice will shape who you become. Guarding your thoughts is not legalism, it is wisdom. You must also understand that training your thoughts is not a one-time decision, it is a lifelong discipline. There will be days of clarity and days of struggle. There will be victories and failures. Do not be surprised by the fight. Do not grow weary in it. The presence of battle does not mean absence of grace. Grace is not the removal of effort. It is the empowerment to persevere. When you fail, do not retreat into condemnation or excuse yourself with despair. Confess quickly, return to truth, resume the fight. The enemy would like nothing more than to convince you that failure disqualifies you from pursuing holiness. That is another lie. Conviction draws you back to God. Condemnation drives you away. learn to recognize the difference. As your thoughts are trained, your affections will follow. You will begin to desire what is good, not merely out of duty, but out of delight. Your responses will change. Your reactions will slow. Your speech will be seasoned with wisdom. Others may not know why you are different, but they will see stability where there used to be chaos, humility where there was pride, peace where there was restlessness. Transformation of life does not come through dramatic moments alone, but through faithful attention to the ordinary discipline of the mind. It is forged in quiet obedience, in unseen choices, in the refusal to indulge lies when no one else is watching. God sees those moments, He honors them, and over time they produce a life that reflects His character. You must decide what kind of life you want to live, not in vague intentions, but in concrete practices. Will you be ruled by impulses, emotions, and circumstances, or will you submit your mind to truth? Will you drift, or will you train? The answer to those questions will determine far more than you realize. Do not wait for a feeling of readiness. Discipline precedes desire. Act on truth, and affection will follow. Set your mind where it belongs. Tear down the arguments that exalt themselves against truth. Replace lies with what is real. Refuse to be a victim of your own unexamined thoughts, and by the grace of God, a transformed mind will bear the fruit of a transformed life. Your thoughts are the primary battlefield of your life, whether you acknowledge it or not. Before a word is spoken, before a decision is made, before an action ever takes shape in the physical world, a war has already been fought in the unseen realm of the mind. Every life, without exception, moves in the direction of its most dominant thoughts. This is not poetic exaggeration. It is spiritual reality. The mind is the command center of the soul. What is allowed to reign, there will eventually govern everything else. Many people believe the real battles are external. Circumstances, relationships, temptations, opposition, hardship. But those are only the visible fronts. The decisive conflict happens internally. Two people can face the same trial, yet one emerges refined while the other collapses, not because the trial was different, but because the thinking was different. The battlefield was not the situation, it was the interpretation of it. Thoughts give meaning to events, and meaning shapes response. Every temptation begins as a thought. Every sin is first conceived in the mind, long before it is committed with the body. No one stumbles accidentally into destruction. There is a progression, a thought entertained, a desire awakened, a justification formed, and finally an action executed. To focus only on behavior while ignoring thought life is like trimming weeds without touching the roots. The surface may look clean for a while, but decay continues unseen. The enemy of your soul understands this well. He does not need to control your body if he can influence your thinking. A distorted mind will sabotage itself without external pressure. That is why lies are his primary weapon. He questions truth, redefines reality, exaggerates fear, minimizes consequences, and appeals to emotion. If those lies are accepted, obedience becomes difficult, and resistance feels unreasonable. Once the mind agrees, the battle is nearly won. But the danger is not only external deception. The human heart is capable of self-deception. You can lie to yourself with remarkable creativity. You can excuse what you want, justify what benefits you, and ignore what convicts you. You can call fear wisdom, call pride confidence, call laziness rest, call bitterness discernment. When the mind becomes skilled at self-deception, it becomes a traitor within its own walls. Many people live enslaved not by chains imposed from the outside, but by narratives repeated on the inside. Narratives of failure, inadequacy, resentment, lust, entitlement, or hopelessness. These internal scripts are rehearsed daily, often unconsciously, until they feel like truth. And once something feels true long enough, it begins to feel inevitable. People say, "This is just who I am," not realizing they are confessing the success of unchallenged thoughts. Your thoughts shape your perception of God. If your mind dwells on a distorted image of Him, your relationship with Him will be crippled. If you see Him primarily as distant, harsh, or unreliable, you will struggle to trust, obey, or rest. If you see Him as small, you will see your problems as large. A low view of God produces anxiety, fear, and self-reliance. A high view of God produces reverence, courage, and humility. That view is formed in the mind long before it is expressed in worship or obedience. Your thoughts also shape how you see yourself. Constant meditation on past failures can produce shame that paralyzes progress. Constant comparison with others breeds envy and insecurity. Constant focus on personal suffering can turn pain into identity. While reflection has its place, obsession is destructive. The mind that endlessly turns inward becomes increasingly unstable. Health is found not in denial, but in truth, centered thinking that neither exaggerates nor minimizes reality. The mind has momentum. Thoughts repeated often enough carve pathways. What you think today becomes easier to think tomorrow. This is why unchecked thought patterns grow stronger over time. A mind trained in fear will instinctively expect disaster. A mind trained in lust will automatically sexualize. A mind trained in bitterness will interpret neutral actions as offenses. These reactions may feel automatic, but they were trained through repetition and tolerance. People often say they cannot help what they think. This is only partially true. While you may not control the first appearance of a thought, you are responsible for what you do with it. You decide whether it is examined or embraced, rejected or rehearsed. Passivity is a choice. Allowing thoughts to roam freely without evaluation is not innocence, it is negligence. A neglected mind does not remain neutral, it becomes vulnerable. The greatest damage of an unguarded mind is not always obvious sin, but gradual dullness. Sensitivity to truth fades. Conviction weakens. What once disturbed you begins to feel normal. This is how people drift far from truth without realizing it. They did not wake up intending to abandon what was right. They simply stopped guarding their thoughts. Over time, what was once unthinkable became acceptable, and what was once unacceptable became desirable. Thoughts also influence endurance. When hardship comes, the mind begins to interpret pain. If suffering is seen as meaningless, it produces despair. If it is seen as personal injustice, it produces anger. If it is seen as evidence of abandonment, it produces withdrawal. But if it is understood within a framework of purpose and sovereignty, it produces perseverance. The event does not change, the interpretation does. That interpretation is formed in the mind. A person may possess great external discipline and still be weak internally. Outward conformity without inward renewal creates hypocrisy, exhaustion, and eventual collapse. You cannot sustain a righteous life through willpower alone while your thoughts remain divided. Internal alignment matters. When the mind agrees with truth, obedience flows more naturally. When the mind resists truth, obedience feels like oppression. Many struggle with inconsistency because their thoughts are inconsistent. They affirm truth verbally while contradicting it internally. They confess trust while meditating on fear. They speak of surrender while rehearsing control. This internal contradiction produces instability. A divided mind cannot stand firm. It is constantly pulled between what it knows and what it feels, what is true and what is familiar. Training the mind requires intentional resistance. Lies must be confronted, not ignored. Feelings must be examined, not obeyed blindly. Just because a thought is loud does not mean it is authoritative. Just because it feels urgent does not mean it is true. Discernment is the ability to pause, evaluate, and respond based on truth rather than impulse. That discipline separates maturity from immaturity. The mind also determines focus. What you focus on grows in significance. If you focus on offense, resentment deepens. If you focus on temptation, desire intensifies. If you focus on lack, dissatisfaction multiplies. But if you focus on what is true, noble, and worthy, the soul gains strength. Focus is not denial, it is direction. You choose what you magnify. A trained mind does not mean a mind free from struggle. It means a mind prepared for struggle. Thoughts will still be challenged. Temptations will still come. Emotions will still fluctuate, but a trained mind does not panic when conflict arises. It recognizes the battle and responds deliberately rather than reactively. It understands that victory is not the absence of conflict, but faithfulness within it. Neglecting the mind has generational consequences. Thought patterns are often passed on through words, attitudes, and reactions. Fearful parents often raise fearful children. Bitter hearts often reproduce bitterness. Anxious thinking teaches anxiety without ever speaking it. Training your thoughts is not only about personal peace, it is about influence. Others live in the overflow of your internal world. The greatest freedom a person can experience is not the removal of difficulty, but mastery over their inner life. When thoughts are no longer tyrants, circumstances lose their power to dominate. When the mind is anchored in truth, storms may shake, but they do not overthrow. This stability is not emotional numbness. It is spiritual clarity. Every day, without exception, you are either strengthening truth or reinforcing lies. There is no pause button. Every moment of unexamined thinking is a missed opportunity for growth. Every tolerated lie is a seed planted. Every resisted lie is a victory won. The accumulation of these small, unseen choices determines the trajectory of a life. The mind will always serve something. If it is not governed by truth, it will be ruled by impulse, emotion, or deception. If it is not intentionally trained, it will be unintentionally corrupted. The battlefield is constant, but so is the opportunity. Victory does not belong to the naturally strong, but to the deliberately disciplined. The war is not won in dramatic moments alone, but in quiet decisions made when no one else is watching, when a thought is challenged, a lie is rejected, and truth is chosen again and again.